So I think we can move on. I must say, you three are making my part in this very easy. Just point
Well,
you
we have a lot
and
to say, you know.
point you in the right direction and take cover. And speaking of that, time to unleash the nuclear weapon. So obviously this petition is calling for changes to policy. How do you three feel about the feedback from the moderators and how they've responded? Who would like to go
I
first?
think my post pretty much sums up my reaction to it, as does that noise I made.
Yes. It's just a non-answer. I mean, I don't know if any of you or any of the listeners have kind of read the comment I made, but just at a very trivial level, I made a comment on the moderation thread that part of the response was saying, we will consider off-site information to lead us towards on-site information, and if you have something, submit it in a grand hall request. And my response was just to point out that the rule that they're enforcing on defamation specifically treats the forum and the get help requests in the same rule. So if it's defamation on the forum, it's defamation on the get help request. So if we can't talk about it on the forum, we can't submit it in a get help request. And the only answer I got to that when I pointed this out was, that isn't what we meant. It's like, okay, but that's the rule that you've written, and that's how you're employing it.
Yeah.
I also think at some point on the forum I posted a fairly detailed analysis of why the policy that they are currently implementing actually isn't consistent with the written rule. And I don't think the written rule is that bad. I think if the written rule was interpreted as a reasonable way, it was more consistent with the text, it wouldn't be a bad rule. But it isn't. And they've made it clear that they're not willing to interpret it any other way.
Yeah, I mean, their response was a whole lot of, well, everything's fine. I don't know what you're complaining about. Look how great we are.
Yeah, to just jump in real quick. I posted something to this effect in the thread as well. But I'm becoming really convinced that just fundamentally, there's a lot of moderators who are just really so out of touch with what's actually going on in the game. I just think they don't understand like what is going on or the mechanisms of the game. And there's kind of two different parts of that. I think one part is I think a lot of moderators clearly don't understand gameplay. Maybe they came from role play circles, or maybe they, are just, kind of puttering around in their nation types, or maybe they did gameplay a long time ago but haven't in a while. Some moderators have said this explicitly. Have said, oh, I really have no interest in gameplay. I don't want to get involved in these issues. Which I think removes a lot of context. And so those moderators can stand back and be like, okay, the forums don't have anything to do with nation states, so it's not our problem. And you can say that, I guess, if you fundamentally don't understand how gameplay works. It's like, okay, we all agree that Raider Defender is part of the game. It's a part of nation states. Does Raider Defender exist without Discord or without regional forums or without IRC or whatever else people use today? Absolutely not. So, it's just a really frustrating line. And, the other part of the ignorance is just, I think, maybe some of these moderators are just so into being moderators, or, just not attuned to the game, that they don't understand how severe some of these allegations have been. Maybe they're just not aware of what's going on. And, I was really disheartened by one of the last responses we got. And I forget which moderator it was, but I believe you responded to them, Asta, but essentially someone I don't want to get involved in interregional politics and bickering.
I think that was Frizz, yeah.
That was absolutely the worst response on that thread by far. And it's you are clearly admitting you have absolutely no idea what is going on. I mean, on a lot of these issues where we're banning people for harassment, the game is coming together on them, which is really encouraging. There's no one out there that's actually, I think Brune is a really great person, or I don't know, maybe there is somewhere in the big blue world, but I
haven't seen any of that.
So, it's just most of this is not political. And, there's so many ways you can arrange the system to minimize, political actions being intertwined in harassment. So, it'll never be perfect, but it's just so frustrating and seems so really out of touch with the reality of the situation. And I know there are moderators who disagree with what was done and what has been said, but it seems like right now they're pretty outnumbered.
I think...
Yeah, and I think... Go on, Asta.
Go ahead. No, go
go
ahead.
for it. I was going to say that I think I don't know that much about other kind of forum administrations and regions in this regard, but I know in Europe here, we've put a lot of time and thought into how we draw that distinction between role-play law and admin roles. And we're very careful. As an admin team in Europe here, we're very careful to say, when we can, like, that's a role-play issue, we're not touching it. And at the same time, like, when something comes up, like, not so much the Brun one, but like the Anumia investigation we did last year, that was initiated through our role-play kind of government. And as soon as we saw it, we said, no, that's something we're dealing with. That's a real-life issue. Please, government, don't deal with this. And to their credit, they said, yeah, okay, we're going to leave it to you. And they stopped. And that kind of system and that kind of division is very important. That's kind of what Hem's saying. Is I don't think the nation states moderators as a whole, at least in terms of their response, understand that distinction between a role-play system which has politics and bickering and these kind of real-life issues where we're talking about protecting people from real threats.
Yeah, I think it's more than that. I think they don't understand gameplay. I think they also don't take the issue seriously. Some of them say they do, but the response is focused on. It was full of condescension, I thought, telling us, oh, well, you can handle that with offsite moderators, you can handle that with going to the police. It's not recognizing the role that the game itself plays in connecting predators to their victims, and it's not recognizing or understanding the real damage that can happen when those people have free reign. And this is a problem I think a lot of people, we see it a lot of the time, is people saying, oh, well, you should just block them if they're harassing you, or why did you keep talking to them, why did you do all this, as if the victim is the one who brought it on themselves by not taking precautions. This is a really common thing that we see, and I think the moderators to a large extent are suffering from the same thing. They see it as, well, if you guys just got rid of these people, and if people didn't send nude photos to one another, everything would be solved, everything would be great. And they don't understand that this is that predators have learned how to coerce their victims. And especially, we pointed this out before, but so many players are underage. They don't have the defenses that older players have against manipulation and against exploitation. And there's nothing we can do if the site lets them talk to each other.
It is scary seeing the level of manipulation, and especially given how much of nation states' population is quite vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Mal, you were going to say something?
I agree with everything that was said. It's they are at the centre of this. So we talked about this in the petition, that yes, we have all these communities that have built up in different forms, and we have systems for kind of trying to protect our own little corner of the community. But the central thing that binds it all together is the nation states website. Europe here wouldn't exist without that website. Like, the North Pacific forums wouldn't exist without that website. And that's why we're all here, and everything connects through there. And it's kind of the border that they draw between nation states and kind of our offsite forums is entirely artificial. It's like nation states is a concept, and it includes all of those offsite forums and all of the interactions that happen through those forums. I totally understand an unwillingness to act in nation states based on non-nation states things. Like, if somebody stalks me on Facebook, I absolutely understand it is not I can't go to the NS mods. I probably can't go to many forum mods and say so and so is dangerous to me, should be preemptively banned from everywhere. Because that's a situation where there's not a connection between the two. It's there, you can't reasonably act against every possible conceivable predator. But in a case like this, the NS forum, the NS website, and all of the NS community forums, they're not separate things. People don't just stumble on them and unconnected. Nobody just joins the North Pacific forum just like, oh hey, what is this thing? No, they join nation states and then they join our forum. There's a pipeline. Yeah, and everything Yeah, that's it. Go on, Hem.
Yeah, I agree. And I think here's some other points that I think are important to bring up in that line of thinking as well. Is like, we have, a game that first off relies, gameplay relies on offsite properties to work because, the administrative team and the mod team has not decided to implement any on-site abilities to do certain things like run a government, to the extent where there's been a long-standing ban in the gameplay forum on the NS forum of region-specific threads. And in the FAQ of that forum, it specifically says, if you want to run a government, you can't do it here. You should set up, an off-site forum. So, we have a pipeline doesn't only exist. I mean, it's perpetuated by the nature of the game. So to then do that and turn around and be like, actually, we have no responsibility for what happens on any of these forums that are populated only by people playing nation states for only the purpose of playing nation states. It's just totally ridiculous. And it doesn't make any sense at all in terms of, having a consistent standard of what is a part of the game. In light of everything else we've said as well, of just how ingrained, these offsite properties are, in nation states. So it completely befuddles me. And it's like, the example they gave is like, Twitter doesn't need to act on what Facebook, does. And like, what you were saying, Asta, is, yes, there is, somewhere like a bridge a little too far where it's like, if I went to the NS mods and I'm like, someone sent me this DM on Twitter, depending on the context of that DM, that might not really be their problem. But, if it's something like
probably Facebook does not, probably nation states does not need to ban Donald Trump Jr. just because he was working with, WikiLeaks on Twitter.
Right. Yeah, again, it's just a question of, and this is what frustrates me, is that they want these really kind of artificial rules when it's really just a sense of common sense. Like a lot of this stuff, like the defamation rule, like I know there was one of the debates that was going backwards and forwards is, well, how do we tell if something's defamation or not? It's like, well, that's something that courts have been doing for hundreds of years.
Right.
And most people have a pretty good sense of that.
At minimum, it really ought to be only in response to a complaint of defamation. That's one of the issues I had, especially with Escade's warning, where she posted the link and all of a sudden Mod came in and bam. If somebody is being defamed, I really think it's incumbent on them to file a complaint, state this false thing was said, here's where it was said, here's how it's harmful. Not for the moderators to preemptively scan all of our threads and say, well, you just linked to something negative about a person. You're done. That's a warning. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing with the acting on offsite evidence rule. Is yes, it's if I go to the nation states mods and say, oh, here's a Discord log that shows this person said something mean to me, please ban them. It's pretty clear that it both can't be verified and probably isn't enough. But like in the Brun case, all we were really asking for in that petition is when we have this huge body of evidence that we think is really convincing, look at it. And if you look at it and say, no, we're not convinced, then we might disagree with you, but at least we can respect that. But what I just can't respect this idea that without even looking at what evidence is available, we can't make a determination. So we're not even going to look at it. I was kind of looping right back to what I said at the start. That's the thing I don't understand. Is it may be that 9 times out of 10 they just look at it and they say, no, we can't act on that for this reason. But the 1 time in 10 when they get something really solid, they could act on it. And that isn't the big time sink that they seem to think it is, because we're already doing that work with the Brun case. We did all that work. All we're asking them to do is look at
less than the effort we put in.
Yeah,
their argument, though, Mal, is that they can't. Essentially, is what I got from is at least is that they can't trust anything that's submitted by anyone because it's probably manipulated for political purposes.
But that's obviously false. I mean, as I referenced in the original petition, they've used offsite evidence before. They used offsite evidence in determining the bans for the Predator incident. Like, they were perfectly happy to accept all of that and verify it to the extent that they needed. So it's false that they can't verify. It's just that they won't.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you, but I mean, their position is just, it's really a nonsensical position, but and Frizz, like, I've proposed kind of a very, very brief, simple framework of how something could work that really puts all the burden on, the administrative teams and communities and really as little as possible on the admins. And, the idea being that only admins can submit and, it needs to be verified. Essentially, I mean, they said, like, it doesn't matter because we have to verify everything that's submitted. Which, I mean, maybe they do to a degree in terms of having to look over it. And like, but I mean, like, again, the Bruin case being an example, like, it wouldn't have taken that much work. We would have sent them the Facebook link that we found and the other social media properties we found. We would have linked it all in the doc, and it would have taken maybe an afternoon for someone, to be like, this obviously.
Even if it took longer, some things take work, and that doesn't mean they're not worth doing. This is the thing that was worth spending the effort on.
Right.
I noticed a couple other contradictions as well. And these I think were pointed out by a few people in the thread. I mean, so for example, they're saying, well, the policy is what it is, and we're not going to change it, and we can't do anything. And also, even if we did, we don't have enough moderators. But if we had more moderators, we still wouldn't change the policy. Both of those don't get to be true. If you want to make a change, make the damn change. If you're understaffed for that, add more moderators. I guarantee you there are people who would want to join the moderator team in order to help out with this. And in the meantime, maybe your investigation takes a lot of time. Investigations take time. That's not an obstacle. That just makes it a little bit harder. But they're saying, oh, we don't have the people to do this, and so therefore we can't. Well, you don't have the people to do it because a lot of us are ashamed of what you're doing. I wouldn't join the moderation team with this rule in place because I would not be able to enforce it. Like, I would feel wrong enforcing it.
Right. It's very funny too, because I feel like every time they post like less active moderators. Like, I remember like one of the posts was like, yeah, we only have like, 15 to 20 active moderators. And it was like, we only have about 10 active moderators. And it's like, oh, we only have like 2 it's like, it kept like getting like smaller. And it's like, yeah, we have 50 moderators, but only 3 are active. And it's like, okay, well, maybe there's
that's
like
not their fault.
Maybe there's a little staffing problem going on here. Which, I mean, I get it, even hiring a small administrative team, it is kind of gut wrenching because it's like, who do you trust with all of this? But at the same time, if we have 2 binary choices, which is expand the moderator team and keep people safe, or keep it small and people are not safe. I mean, those are pretty easy decisions, even if it means, maybe moderators are taking a little bit more of a risk on, I don't know. I don't think we need to be 100% ironclad on each one. If we're like 95% on every moderator we hire, and it's nuts because it's like you could find out things about people. It's like they're not active on the NS form, so they can't be considered, which is just totally like bogus. Especially when you're talking about like just when they're talking about they're like talking about how it takes like about 3 to 5 years to vet someone or whatever they're going on about how long it takes to vet, and it's like essentially they're saying, well, if we don't know you on the forum, it's hard to really consider you. And it's like, there's an easy core of administrators in like the North Pacific and the South Pacific and Europe that I think would consider.
And I think current mods could also, make some serious recommendations. Mouse is a moderator, Elu's an admin, Maul's a mod. Like, they could recommend people that they know and trust, even though they're not active. But because they're not active on the NS forum, they don't get considered. It's also worth pointing out a lot of older players are a lot less active on the NS forums because we come from a time that's pre what they are now. We come from Jolt or whatever was before Jolt. And like, those were terrible. Those were dark days. There's a reason why most of us stick to ours, because those used to suck and we never got in the habit of posting in them. And we never built the habit once they were less terrible, because why would we? And so it's this combination of like, well, we've been around for a while. We know what we're doing, but we never got active there. And so you won't consider us. And also, I'm not going to get active in the NS forums because of how shit the moderation team is at times. So it's like this, you can't win here.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on nation states for well over 10 years, and I think I have about 20 posts on the forums, and probably 10 of those are in the recent discussion about this issue. So, I mean, I just don't use them, and the few times I've strayed into them, I immediately leave and think I don't want to be using this because it's not a good environment. I mean, just the complete stupidity of some of the counter arguments to the petition that I read that just weren't responsive at all to what the petition said. I was just like, I can't be bothered dealing with that. So I don't
you mean like the moderation's official response that was not responsive at all to what we actually said?
Yeah, And I mean, go on.
Go ahead, Val. I interrupted you. I thought you were done.
No, just this idea that that it even necessarily has to be a lot more work for them, I think is just false. I mean, we've done that, like we've been saying, we've done that work, and there's people who are willing to do that work. I mean, there's no reason we couldn't. If they wanted to have an investigations bureau, they could hire a bunch of people who'd be like, out of the existing offsite teams who've got experience doing this stuff. They could hire probably 10 people overnight if they just asked the right people who have experience doing this thing, and their sole job could be to investigate these kind of complaints and put a case together. And we already all do that. We know how to do that. And there's no reason that they couldn't just let us continue to do what we do, but in a bigger group, which would take some of the pressure off us. Because, like, if I was busy and couldn't deal with an investigation, somebody from North Pacific could pick it up, or somebody from South Pacific could pick it up. But they're not even willing to talk about it, it seems. It's like they don't even want to think about how they could make it work. They just want to say no. And it's not really clear to me why they don't want to even think about ways that they could do it.
Yeah, one thing that was very striking to me is the speed at which they came to this decision. I don't think there was any serious move to reconsider, and my suspicion also is, and I don't know this for a fact, so no one's telling me anything. My suspicion is that was maybe intentional, because I do know there are a few moderators on the team that do strongly disagree with the current position. Yeah. And I think we're trying to convince people to relook at it, or at least, come to some kind of, middle ground that at least be a step in the right direction. And I really get the sense that those who really liked the status quo really wanted to kind of wrap this up as quickly as possible.
I agree. I mean, that sort of fast decision was unexpected and upsetting. I think, obviously, I wish they'd made a different one, but they could have at least pretended to take the time to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because I've not spoken to everyone who signed it, but my sense is they didn't even kind of reach out to any of the people that signed that petition to kind of discuss it. And that would have been, to me, a sensible minimum thing to do, would be to actually have a discussion with the people.
As the official author, they certainly didn't reach out to me.
Yeah, I know the people who
reached out to anybody else, but I did not get contacted. But no, like, that would be fantastic if there could be some sort of, small group of us sits down with a group of them to figure out something that would work. I would love that. But no.
It's kind of bonkers, because it's like, I feel like there's a lot of obvious middle ground, or a lot of obvious, starting points, that really
good points for compromise.
Right. And, it's, maybe it's not, it's not going to be what we'd all maybe want first step, but, there's a lot of easy stuff they really could have done. And, the fact that they kind of dug their heels in and try to wrap this up as quickly as possible is just not encouraging. So yeah, I guess we'll see what happens next, but it's not great. It really looks like a lot of them are coming out, in force now after the fact, to kind of defend this terrible, decision. And it's really disheartening to me that basically the biggest defense I've been, you hear from them is, and from their supporters as well, is that being a mod is hard. And that's really what
shit.
Like, that's really what I feel like all of Frizz's posts have been, effectively, is, being a mod is like really hard. And, I'll say Frizz has been doing it for a long time. So is some of the other mods. And I respect that. I really do. I do appreciate it, but that can't be it. That can't be the only rationale. Yes, it's hard. This is going to be hard, and making a change is going to be hard. Doing it is going to be hard. Implementing the change is going to be hard. Finding people to do it correctly is going to be hard. Going after people who harass people is going to be hard.
Sounds like you
doesn't
think
mean
this is all going to be hard.
It's going to be hard, yeah, but it doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Definitely.
Yeah. Which I think that leads nicely into what you and I were discussing, Hem. So, like before we came on the radio earlier, Hem and I were kind of talking about the fact that the logical next step for us at this point is if the nation states moderation aren't going to do anything, which seems to be what the message we're getting, then we need to be really thinking about what can we do better to do what we can, because I think there are things that we can do better to improve at. So in my experience with like with the Blood investigation, you said like the North Pacific trusted our investigation and acted on it. But I know with every investigation I've done, I've always felt we haven't really decided or got a system in place as a community, a wider community, for how we share that kind of information. Like what do we share, what don't we share, how do we do it? And I think we have to start looking at that as a group, like bringing people in and say, okay, so how can we as forum moderators across the community do a better job of protecting people? I'm just going to leave that hanging as a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I really think this needs to kind of, from this point on, spur kind of a greater discussion amongst those of us who are admins or, moderators in a community, and, kind of come together and really have more dialogue. I know people have talked about, a central database, and maybe we don't start out with that, because I know there have been some, there's been some contention about having like a database, but maybe it's just like a central discussion, or, a central place where we can talk, be that like a Discord server, like a separate forum, like a forum for the forums, like how much more meta can we get? Just some place we can like really, be together, and it's not political. Because I want to be honest, like the last week, since we banned Brune, it's been a really encouraging view of nation states for me. The fact that, people like, Tim and, others who like, haven't necessarily been friends to, Europeia politically, or, me politically, have really come forward and done the right things and really helped us out. I think we can do this. I think we can have a non-political place where we talk about keeping the game a safe place. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, and I really want to have it be a collaborative process and not someone...
Ooh, I've got it. How about cops, but for sexual harassment?
I think something like that could be good.
Feel free to laugh. That was a joke.
Oh, I was really like... I
mean, because cops worked so well, and it was fantastic, and, yeah.
Probably something a little less, in-game political Asta, but the heart.
Yeah. Well,
heart is.
Yeah. I do think something like that might be a reasonable approach. Obviously, it couldn't be the same thing, but even just something like a pledge that regions or even admins can take, which says, if we are notified about something like this, we will investigate. And if our investigation turns up credible evidence, we will act on it. And what individual region or admin finds credible is gonna vary. And what they decide to do with that might vary. One region might decide to do, a permanent ban. One region might decide to do a temporary ban. But at least that would signal we take this stuff seriously and we want to help.
Yeah, and I think it starts with we should try and get as many admins from sort of significantly sized regions together to just kind of have a chat about this in the not too distant future. We should have just a Discord channel. We should just set up a Discord channel or something and just pick a time and invite every admin from every big region and just say, like, we want to talk about this and see who shows. I suspect like a lot of people will show up. There's no one who's an admin in a big region who I think is not going to want to take this seriously, and just talk about it and brainstorm, like, what can we do to support each other? What evidence do we want? How do we want to share evidence? Because, I mean, there are balancing concerns. I know one of the reasons that I'm thinking about this is some of the investigations we've done, I've been approached by admins from kind of middle-sized regions asking for, like, copies of the evidence, and I've been kind of thinking, well, I'm happy sharing this stuff, but I don't really know this person that well, and I'm not happy sharing, this part of the evidence with them because I don't know what they'll do with it. And kind of figuring out ways we can minimize that and kind of have a standardized system where we know, at least with the kind of the larger regions, we know we can trust each other. with certain things would be a huge step forward.
And I will say also, I don't think this is over yet. I don't think we have to just, resign ourselves to this particular response being what it is. So, I mean, I have some plans in terms of escalating this if moderation won't do anything. But I don't think we have to simply accept what they're saying. I think we can definitely continue to fight.
I don't disagree. I agree. I do think, it's like kind of prepare for the worst, but, hope for the best, like I definitely think
there's definitely always more that regions can do as well. I mean, more education of our members is never going to be a bad thing. Seminars or whatever, talks about sexual harassment, threads about them, instructions for reporting them, what to do, if somebody bothers you, that sort of thing. That's always going to be good to have. But I don't think I don't want anybody to give up hope yet.
I mean, another thought I had about that is if we can get a large group of people to come together and start trying to deal with this ourselves, that in itself is valuable in kind of counteracting the narrative that the mods are giving us. You say, look, you're saying you're worried about politics here. Look at this large group of people who, in response to your refusal to do anything, are all saying, okay, well, we're going to step up and do something.
Yeah. Well, I think, just look at the list of signatures that I got. I mean, you have people from all sorts of different, nation states groups. So it's not just gameplay. There's role players as well. There's issue authors. Yeah. There's people who are generally non-political. You've got people who've been around for 15 years. You've got people who've been around for a few weeks. This is a major issue, and it is something that unites a lot of us. In the same way, and the cops thing was a silly idea, but in the same way that forum destruction united people across the gameplay community back when we wrote that. This is not a political issue, and it really. To go back to that point earlier, and I'm sorry to go on this again, but it really pissed me off when Fritz said that, because this is not a fucking political issue. This is people's lives.
Yeah, and I think the players understand that, and for whatever reason, the moderation team collectively doesn't seem to understand.
Does not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of that is just really being isolated from the game and not really understanding what's going on, and maybe. Part of it's also kind of a willful ignorance in terms of but it's some kind of, it's just ignorance. Because if you're faced with this kind of stuff, honestly, when you're in the trenches with this kind of stuff, and people read the Bruin report and they were floored. It was for a few days, it was people were having a real emotional response in terms of a full range of feelings of feeling guilty if you had a suspicion early on and you might have felt like you didn't do enough, or if you felt appalled because Bruno was one of your close friends, it's this is really serious stuff. And it's I feel like it's the dots aren't connecting for some reason for the moderators. It's not coming together where they realize this is impacting people on heavy degrees. And there are examples, more explicit and that clearly impact people for the rest of their lives. So yeah, I agree 100% that they need to take this more seriously, and they're just not right now.